Hello, my name's Tiffany Culbertson. Thank you so much for joining me. Well, before we begin, I have a question. What do you know about deafblindness? What are some things that you know right now? Take a minute and jot them down. Does anyone feel brave enough to share? Fantastic. This is a great place to start. This is what we know right now. Let's continue and see what more we can learn. As I said, my name is Tiffany Culbertson. I'm a teacher for the deaf or hard of hearing for the East Zone of Louisville ISD. Soon, I'll be a teacher of the deaf blind, as well as a teacher of the visually impaired. I've been in this field for 27 years, and I've learned, as probably some of you have, that every day of those 27 years has been different and new. Um, but let's get started. The title of our program is Opening the World of Communication to Individuals with Deafblindness. But you'll notice I've started with a quote. Mark Twain once said, "Kindness is the language the deaf can hear and the blind can see." I'll tell you, this is the language those with deafblindness can feel. You may be asking yourself, oh, what did I sign up for? Well, connection is the key to communication. Today, you will learn how to connect with your student with deafblindness in order to improve their life experience. You'll learn some about vision and hearing loss and how the combination of both of those change everything. You will leave with skills to immediately put into practice and a simple plan to keep you on track. So, let's learn about working with students with deafblindness and specifically your campus student. What will you be able to do when we're finished? Well, first, you will recognize the unique life experience of a student with deafblindness. Second, after learning some of the preliminary information, you will be able to predict specific needs for students with deafblindness. Third, you will learn and practice basic techniques for you to use when building rapport in order to increase communication. And finally, as a team, we will design a daily plan to improve the lived experience of your student with deafblindness. So let's begin. Let's start with that unique life experience. We're going to do a brief writing. Don't worry, it's not going to take long. I want you to use the picture on the next screen to write 3 sentences. Make sure to use rich language because in this lesson, we're looking for adjectives. Go. It seems like some are struggling. Don't worry, you just need to write 3 sentences. But if it's too much, that's fine. I need you to write 2 sentences. But it's important for you to use the adjectives. Without support, this task is not possible. This student would need a visual or a description of what's going on in this picture. This is what some students with visual impairment experience in the classroom every day. This is actually an example of total blindness. But not all blindness is total blindness. Let's do this assignment again. Remember, we're writing and using adjectives. Don't forget to mention vivid color, please. What about now? I see many of you are starting to get what I'm going with here. Yeah. Here we have another example of visual impairment. Does anyone know anyone with color blindness? You probably do. Although in this instance, we can see the topic of our sentences. Are we able to write all those vivid descriptions of the colors? Absolutely not. Again, this is where support is needed. But there's the third image that you really need to see. Now, you may be able to tell what we are writing about. We're actually writing about rainbow popsicles. You can see the colors, but if you notice, the center of this image is obscured. There seems to be a spot. This is actually called a coloboma. That's not the important part. What is important is that you realize this is how your student with deaf blindness sees. What you need to remember about that is if you're looking at the image, you can only see the periphery, everything that's around the center. Typically, when we pick something up, we pull it up, we put it right in front of our face. That's not going to work. That's not going to work. And you're going to see your student with deaf blindness move their head in order to get a better view of what they're needing to see. We know that your student needs things from the right and right at her eye level. She'll adjust her head to be able to get that perfect spot for best image. Now, we have seen how vision can affect a simple writing lesson. Let's take a second and look at hearing. So, what about hearing loss? It's not like vision loss, that's for sure. Many of you are wearing glasses, just like mine. I take my glasses off and I can't see. I can't see the words that I'm supposed to be reading, and I definitely couldn't see down a road. But when I put my glasses back on, everything is clear. Everything. That's not the way hearing aids work. Hearing aids make everything louder. Everything. Now, we do have some very fancy digital hearing aids, and they're able to raise specific areas and sounds to see if we can get those to sound louder. And they're great, but they make everything louder, and they do not make it where you can hear like a typically hearing person. So you need to keep that in mind. I have an example of what it's like to have hearing loss. Pay particular close attention to the end of the video where the hearing loss starts to become more significant. So before I press play, are there people here who know this cartoon? It's a good one. Let's look and see.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Aha! You're on my apartment building on Granite Avenue. You owe me $300. Get it up?
Fred, take it easy. It's only a game.
Wilma, I'm just like them big tycoons. I play to win. Barney, pay up or get out of the game.
Put your books in. That's one down and two to go. Ready? It's your turn. I don't have any more money either. You got it all. Then I'll take the mortgage on your open toe. So come on, take the dice. Well, you don't just sit there like a dummy. I will not have you talking that way to our guests. Come on, Barney. I think we better go home.
There we go. So at the very end, were you able to tell what Barney and Fred and Betty and Wilma were saying? No, you could tell that they were talking, but you could not hear what they were saying. This is closer to what your student with deaf blindness can hear. But in actuality, she doesn't even hear that. She's more likely to be able to hear things like lawnmowers. Now, does that mean you shouldn't talk when you're with her? Absolutely not. Keep talking. She may be able to tell that your voice is on and your voice is off, and that is comforting. But she cannot hear your words. So keep that in mind.
1, 2.
So let's pause. I want you to write down a note. We've seen how hearing loss can take or affect a simple assignment. You've heard what hearing loss does to speech. I want you to take a minute. What makes the lived experience of a student with deafblindness unique? Remember, your student sees around the edges and cannot hear the words that you say. How would that change your classroom experience? Go ahead and jot down a couple quick questions that you might have about deafblindness. I hear some excellent insight going on in the room. I can also hear some really great questions. If you can't see well and you can't hear voices, how can you communicate with others? This seems to be a very, very common thread. I also heard someone say, how is she not terrified all the time? Let's keep going. It comes down to this. If you cannot see or hear well, how else do you gain information? This is a topic of intense research for many. We're not going to delve into it deep, but I do want to hit some highlights. First, let's talk about your skin and let's talk about touch. Your skin has 4 different mechanoreceptors that provide different information. Is that the important part? No, let's keep going. We're going to try it. The feeling of light, pressure, and vibration is one of the receptors. Try it now. Light, pressure, vibration. You can feel that because of those receptors. Try it on the inside of your arm and feel the difference. Now, let's trigger a different one. What about light touch? Try it on the inside of your arm. I'm not going to do that one. Do you like it? Lots of people do, lots of people don't. Let's move on because there's more. Slow vibration. And last, we experience texture and pressure through that very last receptor. So pressure down, pressure down. How do you receive it? It's different with your hand open versus closed. That's one of the receptors. Pain is completely different. Pain is when the nerve ending sensing pain beeline straight for your brain. A slap, a burn, ice, the prick of a needle all trigger what is called a spinal reflex. Have you ever kicked something in the middle of the night? Boom, your leg pulls back. Spinal reflex. This is important to remember. So, here we are. Humans are by nature linguistic beings. You know this to be true, and so do I. Every chance that you've gotten to chat leads to an outbreak in communication. Everybody knows. Nasland and Peterson are 2 researchers of deafblindness and communication from the Netherlands. They spent years studying the tactile sense and language. Individuals with deafblindness may use tactile language as their primary means of communication. Research has also shown them to be more in tune with that tactile information, the press, the touch, vibration. But they're also more sensitive to it. And that's where that pain part comes in. Let's look at a professional adult with deaf blindness so that you can see how he communicates. Look for what sense is he using? How's it happening? Let's go.
Oscar Serna is speaking in a brand new language. Oscar is both deaf and blind, or deaf-blind. He works at Gallaudet University on a project tracking the evolution of a language for those who can't see or hear. This new language is called Protactile ASL. The ASL stands for American Sign Language, which uses visual signs for words and phrases. Protactile ASL communicates entirely through touch. For example, here's a sentence in ASL. Here's how Oscar would say the same sentence in Protactile ASL. Historically, deaf-blind people communicated through American Sign Language, Braille, and fingerspelling, where each letter of each word is signed into a person's hand. Helen Keller, maybe the world's most famous deaf-blind person, used fingerspelling. But those are limiting, especially when deaf-blind people want to talk to each other. Protactile ASL emerged in the early 2000s as once isolated deaf-blind people began to form communities. Deaf-blind people have been adapting American Sign Language and adding gestures for things many languages don't have words for. For example, this tap on the hand is like nodding. The language has been evolving ever since.
Now, what's new in Protactile is that we're seeing things that were used in visual sign language be transitioned from the use of space to the use of the perceiver's body.
Traditional theories of language defined it as something seen or heard, but Protactile ASL proves that language can also be communicated through touch. And for the people speaking it, it allows for a life with richer communication.
Since I became Protactile, all of the channels have opened up. Information flows freely. It's like going from dial-up to broadband.
All right. What are some of the things that you noticed? Did you notice how there were signs that were being used within the space of the other person? Did you also see how they used some other type of taps, hand tickles, to show different other nonverbal means of communication, like agreement or a laugh? These are called tactile and protactile communication. So, am I expected to do that? No, that is an intervener. I am expecting that you are not going to be fluent in ASL. And are you going to be shifting it? Absolutely not. This, again, these are interveners. And an intervener is a nationally certified professional. It takes years of training, internships, exams. You have to submit a portfolio, and you have to earn the certification. It is very difficult. But there are things that we can do and we can learn together for your student with deaf blindness. So, after watching Oscar and his intervener, what needs could you anticipate that our student with deaf blindness needs addressed? Take some time with your table together. I want you to create a list of things that our student could benefit from while at school. Excellent. So, we know that our student needs our contact. How are we going to do that? Number one, we're going to approach slowly from the right. We're going to put our arm slowly on her tray. We're going to wait for her to acknowledge that our arm has been put there. And then we are going to slowly slide our forearm to come in contact with her forearm. Why don't you try it right now with someone at your table? Remember, what we're trying to do is establish rapport, allow your student with deaf blindness to know that you're in the space. Contact and observation are our first steps to communicating with our student. I've heard many staff members say that she doesn't communicate, but I always seem to know what she needs. Well, we're going to talk about that because research has shown she is communicating. We just need to pay closer attention and recognize that what she is doing is communication. So, you're thinking to yourself right now, you've seen the video, you've seen how deaf blind people use tactile and protactile communication. What is our responsibility here? So, the art committee supplies us with everything that we need to be successful and to develop and strengthen communication with our student. We have one-to-one support that is established within the art. That person needs to be consistent. Our student cannot have her support change. Our student is the priority. I just saw that administrator back there. Yes, if someone else is busy on the other side of campus, that does mean that this student's one-to-one aid cannot be pulled to cover that duty. Our student is the priority. Now, along with our art committee, we are going to use data to drive our day-to-day decisions. The field of deaf blindness has research-supported techniques for language development and communication. So let's look at that next. There we go. This is an example of the communication matrix. We're going to be using this and another piece of data for collecting information. So first, this is the communication matrix. The matrix is a free online assessment tool that's designed to determine how an individual is communicating and to establish a trajectory for that future growth. There is a manual that is available on exactly how to use and work with the communication matrix. It is not a difficult task, and it is great for everyone to have good information. Now, there is a second piece, but let's look at this first one. See how nice and visual it is? The gray boxes are ones that we're not worried about. See those orange boxes? Those are mastered tasks. And then there's that one yellow box. That's where the skills are emerging. That's where we're going to keep our focus so we can continue moving forward in that communication growth. But there's one piece that makes it even easier for us. Here's a different way to look at the matrix. The skills list is easy to read, and it reminds you what to look for when communicating with our student. Because you remember, our student communicates using body movements and contact. We're going to have one person working with her, and that's critical. Those micro movements that we're looking for, limb movement, head movement, cries, grimaces, that's going to be easier to see from someone who is familiar with her. Will we work together to look for and support additional language cues? Yes, of course. Will there be more training? Yes, of course. We as a team will actually be meeting weekly. Don't worry, I saw that look. It won't be long meetings. It'll be very short to keep us all on the same page. Now, let's look at another tool that I will observe her with to give you the best information possible. This is another fantastic researcher. This is Dr. Jan van Dijk. He dedicated his life to research to the communication methods for individuals with deafblindness. Through observation of movements, interactions, and emotions, Dr. Van Dijk was able to establish consistency in the tactile language of those with deafblindness. He figured out by closely watching micro movements and interactions, you could see how people with deafblindness were communicating. He had different observational areas, and we're actually going to look at those because as you're working with our student, I want you to keep those in the back of your mind. First part is biobehavioral state. So, how aroused or alert is the person? Were they asleep? Were they quiet? Were they quietly awake? Were they fussy? If they're too tired or agitated, it's not going to be a good day to start communication. You need someone to be active, awake. Now, how does the individual show acknowledgement? This is called the orienting response. It's the direction of attention which allows maximum gathering of information. So they're going to focus their eyes are going to widen. They're going to turn their head towards the stimulus. They might even become still if they're trying to figure out what's going on. All of these are cues called orienting response. Next, we have learning channels. What is the sensory avenue that the child, or in this case, high schooler, prefers? Are they using vision? Yes. Are they using touch? Yes. Are they using sound? Not as much, but we cannot discount it. Are they using vibration? Are they using movement? How does the individual show preference? This is called approach and withdraw. So if they're unhappy, are they pulling away? Do they turn their head? The lived experience has to be respected. When you are looking at an individual with deafblindness and they pull away, that's telling you stop. There are more. Let's take a look. So there are actually 8 areas that I'm looking at. Memory has 2 sections: habituation and anticipation of routine. Habituation is the ability to focus on a priority. So if lots of things are happening in the classroom, is this kid be able to stop and focus on what needs to be attended to? Or do they get trapped in all of the little pieces? Anticipation of routine. Does the child have the ability to anticipate the next steps and learn and remember routines? This is why we're going to keep things consistent for our student so she can develop that anticipation. Social interaction. How does the individual engage in turn-taking behaviors? So when we talk, we take turns, we look to each other, we see. Do they orient to sound? Which means, do they turn their heads? Do they shift their body? we'll be looking for little behaviors so that we can see how your student socially interacts. Communication. How does the individual express needs? Non-symbolic communication is like use of facial expressions, gestures, postures, body movements, acting on and with objects. This is how your student communicates. Symbolic communication, that's words, spoken languages, signs. Maybe they use print, maybe they use Braille. Your student does not currently use symbolic communication. We're going to be focusing on those non-symbolic aspects. And then problem solving. Is the individual alert and aware that there is a problem? Let me tell you, that's when figuring out what she needs, you will always know. Do they then must attain this attention, and do they persist until the problem is solved? Oh, yes. This looks like cause and effect, or maybe how things function. But how are we going to take all of that information and use it? Let's get it together. Our next order for our student is to establish trust and rapport. She must have consistency. You've heard me throughout this entire time talking about consistency, consistency. A single lesson plan will be shared amongst the entire team. We will complete each goal using the same steps, in the same way, with the same words, with the same signs. Every week, we're going to have that short meeting. We're going to review that weekly plan. And so let's look together and start one now. This is called systematic instruction. It is a single plan for the whole team. Let's break it down. The first box at the top is the content. This is our goal that we're pulling directly from that IEP. It's a specific objective. We will also be correlating the goals to make sure that everything is exactly what our student needs. Second box, materials list. Pay attention to the materials list. All the goals will begin with the exact same material. Remember, our student doesn't see well. She also cannot hear your words. She needs the materials to be the continuity. She needs those materials to be exactly the same so that she can learn what she does when she has them. So, are we going to be using the exact same materials? That's a yes. That bottom box is prompting, excuse me, the final box is about consistency, and it's our instructional procedures. First, let's look at the prompting at the very, very top. Prompting is the exact way that we will introduce the activity to our students. Again, exactly the same. We will slowly show her what we are doing to the right and at eye level. We will move the item slowly to the desk. Then we will slowly put our hands under her hands and guide her to the activity. If you look at that next, the fading, where are my ABA people out there? You'll understand that the next section is all about fading the supports. You'll recognize all of those verbs. Right now, we are not going to be fading. We need building of rapport, and we need constant contact and consistency. Feedback is the exact way that we will all praise. So again, we must praise the same way for our student to recognize that that's what it is, that it's praise. So what we are going to do as a team is that we will hand under hand, clap one time. This is a movement that she already enjoys, but that is what we are going to signal as success. The generalization section is where we're hoping that she will then understand that our constant and consistent tactile language crosses activities. And that's it. Now you have designed a daily plan to improve the lived experience of your student with deafblindness. Consistency builds rapport and trust. Trust builds language and learning. And you heard me mention hand over hand. So let's take a second and let's learn a little bit about what that is before we end our day.
The hand-under-hand approach is a way of engaging children with activities in a non-threatening way. So it's actually all about allowing the child to use your hands to explore an object they're not familiar with. In that way, they feel safe, secure, happy to touch something as long as you're touching it first.
So using a hand-under-hand approach is really key in actually getting the child's enthusiasm, engagement, and an ability to play independently, but also to develop their communication in deciding what they like and what they don't like. It allows them to feel safe, and if things are a bit challenging for them, that they can actually step back because they can just use your hand as a means of actually saying, well, you can carry on playing, but I'm just going to just watch for a minute, and that's okay.
So I'm going to ask Anne to explore this rather unusual object. It's got lots and lots of active parts to it. There's a mirror, there's beads, there's all sorts of different things. And if she hasn't seen this before, the first thing I would do was allow her to map the object independently. Look at it, if she can see, touch it and feel it, explain the edges of it. She's not sure about it, so we retreat. I offer my hand as support when she does this, around the edges of the object, and then safe spaces where there aren't any things that are going to actually happen that might worry her or make her anxious. And then gradually I'd move her hands nearer something. When she's refusing to look, that's fine. We start again. And so offering my hand as support, we go back up the object, we look at it again, we revisit all the safe spaces, the edges and the ledges. She still doesn't want to have a little play with it, but we're actually going to go, and I'll start by using my fingers to let her see something's actually happening here. Actually, that's quite interesting. She's quite enjoying that. So we allow that play to develop. And gradually, she should be able to play independently with that, with something she likes. All the time our hands are in contact with each other, all the time we keep touching. I'm there all the time showing her different things.
Hand-under-hand approach is really key to getting the child's independence and taking the lead and developing that confidence to be able to explore objects on their own and have that confidence to do so.
Excellent. Now, you were able to see hand under hand. Remember, when you're working with our student with deafblindness, contact is going to be key. Contact keeps a person with deafblindness connected to the space. It makes them feel safe. It makes them feel respected, seen, and understood. If our student is not willing to participate, as you saw in the video, you let them pull their hand back, but you don't lose contact. Have your forearm resting against her forearm. Have your hand lightly under her hands. Show her, even though she wasn't quite ready, you're there for her. You're still paying attention. You will support her when it's time to move in and try again. Before we close, this is when I say our district motto is one LISD. This is an example of that motto. This is living it. This is us working together as one for the betterment of one of our students. We've made it. Today we've covered a lot of material, but is this it? No, no. We will continue learning together every week. Before we step away though, what are some things that you did learn? Excellent. We have some great learned experiences today. Today we have recognized the uniqueness of the life experience of those with deaf blindness. We have predicted some very specific needs for our student. We've learned some techniques to use and build rapport and increase communication. And we designed a plan that will be used by all staff. Remember, that was the systematic instruction. It will be that piece that provides the consistency to build and trust and to expand language. This has been great. Thank you very much for your participation, and I'll see you in the classroom. Here are the references that were used for this presentation. If you would like to look at the videos again, you can find them on YouTube. They are here. I'm happy to email this out to you and happy to share those email links. Thank you very much.